I don't start too soon.
Cool.
We good?
Let's say we're good.
All right.
All right, we'll call our Budget and Finance Committee meeting to order here at noon on December the 15th. Presume there are no announcements at this point in time. Moving on to the consent agenda. The request for your previous meeting memorandum and item 4, R1220021, authorizing city control to transfer certain city budget funds and other certain budget categories. And
Yeah, so I will touch on one item in there is that we decided to, if you guys recall, when we did the 2021 budget, we didn't know where we would land on lit, so we had removed PTO cash out from the budget. We got the numbers from Carmel. We decided to do PTO cash out for employees. It's going to be before the end of the year, so it'll be on the last payroll of this year. So we can absorb it with some other things, but we did a transfer just to be safe to put it into all the appropriate personnel categories. But that's really what that purpose was. And if you recall, this is 2021 was the first year we hadn't done that PTO cash out in, I forget, a number of years, just with what we didn't know was lit. But that's the higher number, that's what you see there. So.
any questions for Lisa on this? Do I have a motion to recommend approval?
So moved.
Do I have a second?
Second.
Motion by Cecilia, second by Selena. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Thank you. Moving on to resolutions, R122021A. Request for a resolution to appropriate additional stormwater funds.
So really a small $20,000 amount. A lot of professional services expenses, but a little bit over related to some printing costs that we do with the bills. Everybody's budgets in stormwater are pretty small, so the person that has the most is Jonathan Valenta in Public Works, and I really don't like to take his excess if he has any yet. So we're gonna see where, I think we're gonna land okay with his budget, but I hesitate to take his excess, so we're gonna do the 20,000 just to be safe. But I think when all is said and done and we even out at the end of the year, it won't be 100% necessary, but we're trending very well in stormwater, right on where we hit projection-wise. So.
Thank you. Any questions for Lisa on this particular item?
No.
Do you have a motion for approval, or to recommend approval, excuse me, for our council meeting Monday night?
Motion to approve.
And do I have a second?
Second.
Motion by Cecilia, second by Selena. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Thank you very much. Moving on to ordinances. 11521A. Ordinance of City Officials approving a short-term loan financing for the annual fleet loan. This is our second reading on this.
Yes. So same exact item you guys saw last month, just the formal adoption of the 2022 fleet loan, and then we'll work on closing before the end of the year. So it's our scheduled replacement of vehicles and all of that good stuff that you guys saw in the 2022 budget.
And any questions for Lisa on this item as well?
No.
Do you have a motion to recommend approval Monday night?
So moved.
A second.
Second.
Motion by Cecilia, second by Selena. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. On to unfinished and new business.
A couple items to talk to all of you about today. First is an update on our sewer acquisition that I think is important and I think good news. We sold the bonds last week, or priced the bonds last week. Our pro forma for us to break even and not have a rate impact on our residents was 3.85% is what conservatively we were estimating. Fortunately, it came in at 2.7% on a 30-year fixed loan, so we think that's really pretty good. And so we're proceeding accordingly. Hopefully we'll close December 29th, is it, Lisa?
Yeah, we're going to close on the bonds on the 22nd and then close on the transaction. Yeah.
So 22nd, we'll take receipt of the bonds. 29th will be the final transaction with HSC, and then you guys will be the proud owners of a sewer utility. So everything's going according to plan, and there have been no real surprises financially for the city. So I don't anticipate having any kind of major issues. Obviously, now we're shifting more into the operational side. So Elliot, as late as 9:30 last night, he and I were talking, making sure that we've got our I's dotted, T's crossed, so that when we take ownership of that, our residents have a seamless experience, both on the logistical side of the plant, but also on billing. So making sure that we know how to bill everyone correctly, and Lisa's working through all of that and the team. So from the finance committee side, just know that the assumptions that we based our transaction on, we're outperforming those right now. So all things seem positive. Anything, Elliot or Lisa, you want to share additional on that?
No, I mean, it's just all in right now, operations, right? So it's kind of a 24/7 job with John Glenna with the sewer piece. But I'll tell you that almost every department in our city is playing a role in this transaction and making sure that from the customer viewpoint, right, our residents have a seamless transition, right? So they shouldn't care about this, and hopefully they won't care about it. Their bill will have, the logo in a different place, so to speak, but that's about it. So we're working day and day night to make sure that happens.
There will be a one-time
You have
change.
to log in for the first time again for that, yeah. But
So our residents who have, automatic bill pay, they're gonna have to re-sign up for that. And so we've got a communications plan to roll out to our residents to make sure that they're aware of that and make it as seamless as possible. We weren't in a scenario where we could just transfer that routing to our account, obviously, so, but we'll make sure we get that all squared away.
Presume HSC utilities, if they receive funds incorrectly, they'll be forwarding those on to us.
Correct.
Yeah.
Yep.
That's gonna happen.
Oh,
Oh,
yeah,
yeah.
yeah, for sure.
Yeah, we're gonna have people that are gonna continue to pay HSE for a number of months and on their auto pays and all that stuff, so we'll get all that ironed out with, HSE. But I will say, this is the first bond of a significant size that we have sold, and so it was very interesting from the other bonds that we sold, that we were almost 4.5 times oversubscribed on our bond sale, last Thursday. So we, had almost over 200 million and 400 million orders. So it was the first time picking up big chunks, $20 million, $25 million pieces of our bond. So from a sales side for us, this is the first time where we've really seen like that huge block ordering on our sales. So it was really it was a very good sale to get oversubscribed on
I'll
that.
take it in town.
Who would have thought? So the main item of the day is this strategy that we're discussing around the two significant quality of life investments we're making in our city, the community center and city hall. And this is a conversation that started many months ago at our retreat, that we had an issue with city hall, and then ultimately we think there's a real need in our community for some sort of interactive community center. We have spent a lot of time thinking through the best financial strategy that we think for our residents that we can deploy, and really trying to be sensitive to tax rate implications, tax implications in general, overall cost of issuance and carry costs, things of that nature, the way that we procure the two facilities. And so today, what Lisa and Elliot are going to share with you is kind of our best strategy that we think moving forward to be able to finance these two projects. It's still at a very high level adheres to the fundamental principle that we're not raising taxes to get these projects done. So we're still in that lane. But I want to talk about how this is mechanically going to work so the finance committee really understands that approach. It does touch on ARP funds. There's a component of that we also bring into this. So that whole strategy gets brought together in this proposal. So I'm going to turn it over to Lisa and Elliot. I'll chime in from time to time as we move forward.
Yep, so I'll go ahead and start. So I wanted to kind of walk you guys through this. You guys see this a lot. This is a little bit projected out. So as you remember, we say 50% of next year's anticipated property taxes as our reserve requirement. So obviously you see our reserve requirement, and then you see our projected reserve balance. And then the difference between the two is what we term kind of our excess reserve. So what cash we have available. So just kind of wanted to remind you that as we look at this, we're obviously in a really strong financial position with our excess cash reserve. And I will say this is an extremely conservative outlook on this, as the mayor will attest, because what this does is assume property taxes continue to go up, making the reserve requirement higher. But we didn't necessarily say, oh, we're going to have offsetting,
By property tax, we mean property tax revenue.
Yes, property tax revenue. Yes, property tax revenue. But we didn't say, oh, we're going to add so much, or that's going to increase our revenue so much that we're going to add all this to the cash reserve. So we are overestimating what we think we need and probably not giving ourselves enough credit on this side of meeting, having an excess each year, budget-wise.
For instance, we tend to outperform, we tend to leave more cash at the end of the year than what we think we're going to. So it's conservative in that regard. It also doesn't contemplate like that we have a third year left of the Carmel arrangement, where if any of that cash came over, that the 1 year, I think we got an additional $6 or $7 million. None of that's contemplated in the excess cash reserves that we show here today.
So, yeah, so again, it's just kind of give you that baseline that yes, we're in a really strong financial position and a lot of things could change to make us in an even stronger financial position.
Your requirements are requirements.
That's our.
That's our own internal, self-imposed. It's
Those requirements, so that's.
not a state order, but not state statute.
Be clear about that.
Yeah, nothing, that is our own internal policy. So one of the things that we talk about a lot is, controlled project. So as we start to talk about these projects, you kind of hit the controlled project limit. So there's two different ways to calculate the controlled project. We're gonna focus on the state calculated one because that's what we're subject to. So each year, you can see it increases about $500,000. So in 2022, you're looking about 17.2, 23, you're up to 17.7. Then 2031, you eventually get up to 21.7, but that's what we'll talk about with like what you can legally do related to controlled projects.
So what that means is that's how much we can do and not have to go to referendum.
That's what you can do without a petition and remonstrance.
Yeah.
Just trying to be clear.
Yes, what that means, yes, control project, it's the amount you can go to without the remonstrance process on that. So I think, and then this is where we can lead into what we're gonna talk about, which we talk about City Hall. So as you guys know, we're looking at a really extensive remodel and revamp for City Hall.
In other words, tear down and build a new one.
Yeah, an enhanced version of City Hall that will have, as you guys have seen and probably heard in the vision documents, some art space on the first floor. So as we've gone through kind of this process, we're looking at about an all-in cost right now. We're thinking about $22 million for City Hall. So $22 million to tear it down, create this kind of vision on this first floor with this art space. So as we kind of look internally as to how we want to move forward and how we want to finance, we looked at a couple different options. As you guys are familiar, a lot of times we'll do kind of bond anticipation notes. Those are what the bands are that you guys see. So we looked at doing that potentially for City Hall. You do a ban option, you pay the capital, you only pay the interest on the interest, you don't make any principal payments during that time. The ban option, when we ran the scenarios, really wasn't advantageous for us. It really puts you higher than the controlled project limit, which wasn't something we were really wanted to go for, but it just didn't make sense because as you guys kind of can look at this schedule and see, so we really try to keep our tax rate level for citizens. And so what this does, as you guys know in the fiscal plan, we model out all our upcoming debt service payments and what those are anticipated to be. So as you can see, we also, as you guys recall, a lot of times we'll do this 1 year GO, and that is what kind of capacity we have to help keep us smooth and to help keep our tax rate pretty level. So what that does is give you a little bit of flexibility in what type of projects you want to move going forward. So for example, for City Hall, if we were to go ahead and issue debt, we could go ahead and in the upcoming years, simply reduce the amount of the 1 year GO that offsets that debt service payment. So you're talking about if you had so if the payoff for the 1 year GO is 5.9, the debt service estimated for City Hall is $1 million, you can still do City Hall and then you still have your 1 year GO at 4.8.
I think one way to think about this is Lisa and Lawrence and Elliot and I sat down, and there are a couple of goals we had. Limit the amount of interest or carry cost we could possibly have on our taxpayers. So how do we build the building, finance the building with the least amount of finance costs associated with it, while still adhering to all the legalities that come with Indiana law around municipalities? What Lisa is sharing with you here is we think the straightforward approach on City Hall is simply we invest in a bond to pay for approximately $17 million of the facility. Then we use a portion of our ARP funds to build out the art center. It will be the single largest investment we've ever made in arts, and I think it fits with what that funding was available. We got 6.9 million. We think appropriately 5 million of that could be used for the full build out of the art center. The auditorium and theater could all be used for that funding. Between those two funding sources, we believe that we can accomplish City Hall and not have an increase in taxes of any sort, and limit the amount of interest that we're paying. So we're not pushing this payment out 6-7 years and then paying a lot of carry cost on that. We're able to start addressing it almost immediately and not having a lot of interest payments. So we think, we really think that's probably the right approach here. We want to make sure that when we build this art center, we build it out in a way that will really have the amenities that people are going to want to have. I mean, if we're going to call it an art center, it needs to have the infrastructure. And we're talking to partners right now that I think can really help guide us to that. But the funds, I think, are an appropriate use for that type of scenario. So that's the strategy.
What would the other 1.9 million be used for with that?
Yet to be determined. What I focused on is what do we need to accomplish this project? What you want to do with the remaining funding, we can continue to dialogue on. But really, we have a portion of it right now that was used for.
We're using it for contact tracing.
Contact tracing.
Yeah, that's,
There's probably $1 million in there that isn't spoken for. But really, my goal was really just what do we need to accomplish the Arts Center and City Hall? And then the remainder of it, you guys can continue to have a conversation about how you want to spend that. But I do think this is a sound investment and something that will last for a very long time in our city.
and
That's the overall strategy for City Hall at this point.
And just as a heads up, I think we've talked about in this, the committee about how contact tracing, ARP is the only available funding source that we have. We can't get reimbursed through FEMA for contact tracing. We can't get reimbursed anywhere else for contact tracing. So it's really the only way, unless you want to go straight out of the health department, and there's pretty significant costs to do that.
The order of magnitude for contact tracing to date has been about $280,000. So we're not talking about a large portion of that 6.9 million, but it is a line item for sure.
God, I have a question.
Yeah.
So my understanding was that the land where we sit now, City Hall, it's sinking or,
Yeah.
so I'm assuming that the costs are included in terms of making sure that it is not gonna happen again, or it's whatever needs to be done to mitigate the underneath the land to sustain the new building so it doesn't happen
Great question. That is-
again.
that is-
You know what I mean? Like, we're in the same position
Right.
20, 30 years later that it's sinking again, so.
Yes, it is contemplated. They have line items in there for these things called geopiers, which are the technology that was used in all the buildings around here that really do ensure the stabilization of the site. So I think we've budgeted for any eventuality that could occur based on bad soils. So that is included in the 22 million. And the good news is we did the BOT process already to get the teams, because one of the questions I wanted was, I want confirmation from the industry to say, you can build an art center in a City Hall in this budget or you can't. And all of the teams that came forward and proposed believed that that was a viable budget. So I feel much more confident sitting here saying, we can deliver the product that we said we were going to, because I've got industry people, a variety of different ones, who during the RFP process really vetted out per square foot costs. And yeah, we we think we can do this. So, I feel confident we can deliver this, within the same parameters that we spoke about.
I will go back, because you know how we talked about, like, we looked at carry costs, and when we talked about trying to be the most advantageous, financial position, if you look at paying carry costs, really all you're doing is paying pure carry costs. So you're not getting kind of a tangible asset out of it at the end. And so if we did elect to kind of pay carry costs and then bring, a bond on, all that does is kind of eat down at that cash reserve. And so kind of when we looked at it in further detail, didn't really make sense to kind of pay the carry costs and drive down that cash reserve. But if we have the capacity to take on the debt, which we do, and still be level, it made more sense to continue with that approach and keep the cash reserve balance pretty strong.
Okay, so then moving on to, the community center.
Yeah, so this is a big chart, so let's see, you go ahead and Tara.
So I think first and foremost, we think the community center all in is probably close to $45 million to meet the needs of our residents. Between court space, aquatic center, classroom space, land purchase, site work, we believe it's approximately $45 million. And so we went to work and identifying how best we could afford to do that, pay for that. And again, we went through a variety of different scenarios, and we landed on a similar concept here, which is not prolonging this to 2031 or 2032, where you're carrying $45 million for 9 years. That's a lot of interest payments. And so instead of doing that, we said, okay, well, how can we start paying this off sooner so that we're not paying those interest payments while still being able to secure the facility, get the facility built, and have the least amount of tax implication on our residents. And so we've come up with a strategy that really puts us purchasing the building outright in 2025. We think that allows us the opportunity to finish the capital projects that we have in the pipeline right now, bring on that debt in 2025, and again, no tax increase. So we think that is the appropriate scenario. It'd be property tax backed. It would allow for us, again, in 2022, 2023, 2024, to finish up some of our other miscellaneous projects that we have on the books. And then in 2025, be able to bring that project onto our debt. Now, we think we're in a strong position there again, because honestly, the interest rates on short-term lending for those 3 years are very low. I mean, we're, some of our bands were less than 1%.
Yeah.
So I think we're, I wouldn't want to do it for 10 years, but for 2 or 3 years to allow us to get these other projects done, I think puts us in a sound position. The other thing that I would tell you is our assessed value has been growing at a rate that's usually outperformed what our assumptions are. So it also provides us an opportunity to reevaluate every year and say, well, maybe we'll bring it on sooner. So all of those opportunities are afforded to us moving forward. And
I just like jump.
Yeah, I was gonna say,
Real quick, this
yes.
total debt payment, just, if you look at this number as it evens out, like, there's no roller coaster effect here, right, with this debt capacity, right? So we're not extremely high one year, then trying to figure out as it dips the next year. This really balances and levels that out in a pretty intelligent way while taking on that $3.1 million a year for the.
Yeah, so this left side right here is really what you guys saw in the column, in the slide before. And then this is basically like, this column is just to really show when you bring on everything, how do you make it work correctly? So how do you get it to balance? So that's all that is just to kind of show. And then like we talked about, the high point is 2024. And so this actually goes a little higher just to kind of keep it under that 2024 amount. But the general gist is the same, is that you can do it. This is how you mechanically reduce.
well,
Yeah.
and I think what's confusing a little bit about this chart is the excess debt capacity that Lisa shows in here is actually your debt amount going down.
Yes.
So in 2031, you actually start to have steep declines in the amount of debt we actually have.
Yes.
So by 2020,
Yeah.
33, you're
Yeah.
down
Yeah.
1.6 million in debt.
Yeah.
So we should start to see a decline. The other thing that this does, and I think it's good for our Standard & Poor's rating, is it keeps our cash reserves intact. We're not eating into our, current cash reserve requirements, nor are we even really eating into our excess cash reserve requirements. That cash is there and available. And I think that's important for a variety of miscellaneous road projects that we need to finish up. They're just, either whether it's resurfacing, whether it's sidewalks, trails, having that excess cash reserve can be really put to use on a lot of neighborhood revitalization that I think is important. We don't want to lose sight of that. So I do think it provides us still a large degree of flexibility when it comes to being able to invest in our community. Any questions on any of that?
Have you, I don't know, this is very in the game, what's, you build this community center, what's it gonna cost to run it?
So,
How are you gonna pay for it?
yep, we've hired a consultant who's operated in consultant operations of these, and we're building out a pro forma right now. My goal, my target, just like as I articulated to you around how I wanted to build these buildings without a tax implication, I want to have the 100% cost recovery outside of debt. I want that done in the pro forma for the community center. So right now we're building that out. Now we're going to have some startup capital for sure, because you got to hire people before you open it. But ultimately, my goal is to have a net operating income of a positive side on the community center. The Monon Center, to be honest with you, I think prior to COVID was netting $700,000 of surplus on an annual basis. Now, the way that I would see this happening, and we would bring this forward to you, but I don't want to set up a non-reverting fund, because I want to start building cash reserves for reinvesting back into that facility. So it really needs to live in its own, it needs to be run like a business where it's, hey, every year are we meeting our costs? Do we have money set aside so that when the pool needs an upgrade or whatever, there's $1 million sitting there to be able to deal with that. That's our goal, and that's a pro forma that we're starting to build out right now.
So will there be a charge then?
Oh, yeah.
To utilize?
Yeah, absolutely.
Services?
Yeah, now, this is where I think it's good that we're gonna own this facility, is that the council and my administration, we can all have an open dialogue about the balance between cost recovery and making it attainable and affordable for our residents. That's gonna be a push-pull that we need to really delve into. And so that's one of the things the consultant's looking at is, what are we going to be offering, and then what can the market here handle? And then we'll have to have some, dialogue about what are we trying to accomplish with the fee structure. But obviously our goal is to get as many residents in there as possible with the least amount of financial burden on them. But we do need to be good stewards of tax dollars, and we want to try to capture all of the costs associated with running the facility. And that'll be a discussion, frankly, even with our partners, like youth sports groups. You can't just come in and use it completely for free. There's got to be a give and take here. So those discussions have started, but we're a long ways from me being able to present to you guys a pro forma. Hopefully in the next 2 months I'd have that. Any other questions?
John, can I ask you a question? About the American Rescue Plan, just to put a finer point on it, if I may. One is the devotion of those funds to the arts.
Yeah.
How does that fit in the parameters of what the ARP, American Rescue?
It would be dedicated or donated to the partners that we have that are 501c3s that could then shape and mold the direction of it.
And then earlier it was talked about the nonprofit grants
Yes.
that come out of the ARP. Is that still being considered?
That was approved in the budget. That was what was contemplated for 2022. The $250,000,
right?
250, yeah.
Yeah.
So as of right now, that's consistent.
So that's still the plan.
Mhm.
So, any thoughts about the timing of that? So if it's for 2022,
I think imminently we've got to get a plan together on how we're going to deploy that. So I would say, by the end of January, we should be communicating to everyone how that's going to get deployed. So really that's a council discussion on how you guys want to go about doing that. And I think even Monday,
We got a work session we're planning for Monday to bring.
the Community Foundation to come in and talk about their ideas on how to do that best. So I think that's an active discussion for sure, but does need to get wrapped up
yeah.
so that we can move forward.
Good.
Yeah.
And I'm assuming there hasn't been any communication to the nonprofit community?
Other than that, I can't speak to that, whether Chris or the process has been communicated or not.
Yeah, I don't think there's been formal communication out on that yet, yeah.
We will,
That should be eminent, it's just, I mean, we're pushing this in January,
I
so.
get it, they're antsy for their,
Sure,
yeah,
yeah, okay, thank you, that's
Yeah.
helpful.
100%.
Just wanting to know, what is the projected timeline for the actual, like, opening of the new city hall?
Great question.
And also
Yeah.
the rec center, like,
So-
what are you thinking in terms of where it would be open? I'm getting a lot of questions.
Yep, so I have unrealistic expectations as usual. So the idea would be that we would be done with design in the spring and be breaking ground on both of these projects yet this year, like, well, not this year, 2022, and towards the end of next fall. Whether that occurs or not, I don't know, but I would love to get these projects off the ground. I think the community's ready and eager for both of them. You know, it's interesting, the city hall is becoming kind of the office part of the city hall is a bit of an afterthought. We'll be above it, but really it's gonna turn more into kind of a community center downtown, more of an arts angle than what we're having with this other one, but,
And I think that's a really cool point, right? Like, I think you should start to think about it as an arts and municipal complex, right? Like, the municipal complex piece to it is really secondary. We just get to live on top of a really cool space.
Yeah. Right. So we're excited about that. And I think there's gonna be more to come in terms of the partnerships that we're forging with different groups that I think will be also very exciting as we bring in the right stakeholders.
So I've been getting questions along the same lines. When City Hall goes down, what happens to everything in here? Where, we
Yeah.
have to find a home for everybody. And, one of the homes that we need to find for is for the health department. What's the plan to find a permanent location for the health?
We think long-term, the health department belongs at the community center, not the one downtown, but the other one we're building. And this idea of culture of health. So envision, if you will, that a vibrant community center where there's a storefront and the health department's there. So if you're there for a seniors program and you need a flu vaccine, you can walk in and get that. So we really believe it belongs in the community center and we're planning accordingly. As for where we all end up for a period of time, we want to keep our costs of relocation down. And so one of the things that we have been evaluating is how many people would be interested from working from home or virtually. And we learned during COVID that quite a few of our people actually can work functionally from home or just come in periodically and check in. And so Jordan on our team is working through kind of what are our actual needs and then looking around at a variety of places where we could go for a period of time. And then where do you have plan commission, council meetings, things like that. We're working through all of that. But, we expect to be dislocated for probably at least 12 months, probably closer to 18 months. So it'll be a transition time to say the least.
Why would anyone want to come back to the office after,
Yeah.
working that long at home?
Well, I don't know, I think it'll be a pretty cool office space when it's done. But the good thing is we do have some cost savings, like all this furniture we bought maybe a year and 2 years ago, Tracy, maybe? Yeah, so a lot of our FF&E, like the furniture and finishes, were pretty good. So I don't know that it's gonna be, we'll have to store it somewhere for a period of time, but I don't know how many TVs are around here, Tracy, but I imagine we'll store those as well and.
Recycle what we can. In my opinion, it's more about the downstairs first floor, making sure that auditorium and that art space is fully considered, which obviously sort of funded separately, it sounds like.
Yeah.
And I think for us up here, it's really just having collaborative meeting space and some additional AV a little bit, but a lot of the furniture, a lot of the existing equipment will absolutely store and repurpose.
Your guys' new home for council is that's an entirely different conversation. That's frankly out of my depth. So they have theater consultants that are part of the team that are talking through that because I have no idea about how to design a theater. But it should be great for both your guys' needs and then ultimately the arts community. And so we'll figure it out. Right now it's looking like there'll actually be like a balcony scenario too. So, how do you secure that so people aren't throwing tomatoes at you guys from second story, all that kind of stuff.
So it would not actually be separate council chambers, if you will, like in Noblesville,
You would,
or
No, you
like
would-
the county, Hamilton County building or whatever, where they have like council chambers and
I think
dais or what, you know.
I think we would figure out a flexible way to, because it's just so expensive to build two facilities that house 400 people or 200 people. So the vision is that we would have a theater that could stand up as a legitimate, put on a performance theater, but that could also double as the city council meetings. And so we're working through all that right now, because boy, to build two spaces with 200, 300, 400 seats for one meeting a month
The
or two
utilization
meetings,
rate, right,
it's
yeah, it's
just, it makes more sense to try to figure out how to make both those work. And so that's where the theater consultants are coming in that understand that world to figure out how we can do that. So you could break out in a solo song or dance if you wanted to, Cecilia, during
Right.
council. It'll work out well.
So that means potentially though, people need to work around like planning commission, city council. So in a way, you know,
I think
I
it's,
mean, it'll be available, but it's gonna also be used for a lot of the
yeah.
meetings.
But I think, you know, if you look at our schedules, you know, one Monday a month, you have a council meeting.
Friday,
Saturday, Sundays are never used for anything.
Right, that's true.
So, but those are all things we gotta get into with not only our consultants, but our arts community and figure out what their vision is for the theater. The performing arts side has always been a little squishier for me. Jocelyn might understand it better than I do, but, that side of the house, I don't understand it as well. And so we gotta bring teams in and stakeholders to talk through what's their vision for how they would utilize it, and then work with the theater consultants to figure that out. But I think they can coexist personally, and the cost for them not to coexist is significant, to build another council chambers.
I will mention under Jordan's leadership, those conversations are cooking.
Excellent, I'm glad to hear
So,
that.
Good stuff.
Good, yeah, I mean, I think, I want everyone to come out of that excited, right? Like, our local stakeholders, everyone to feel like they're a part of it, and I think we've got the horsepower now to really figure that out. So I think it'll be good. Anything else, guys? All right, I have to shoot downtown, but, we're gonna keep plugging along. The next real meaningful steps on this, Lisa, would probably be, well, it'd be our build, operate, transfer final agreements. So we're gonna go heads down now into design mode for the next 2 to 3 months. There's gonna be a lot of that going on, a lot of it. And then hopefully in the April, May timeframe, we'll have a final maximum price for each one of these and a full concept. And I think sometime this spring, you'll start to see us also work to announce our partnerships. One of the things that I'm excited about both the community center and the city hall is that we have an opportunity to partner with a lot of great organizations from our region that can bring a lot to the table. And so it really is gonna be not just a city announcement, but a collective group announcing these facilities. So I think it'll be a busy spring, but it'll be a productive spring. Thank you, guys.
I do have one
Yes.
question not related.
Yeah.
How's Chris doing?
I've
You
talked
know,
to him 6 times today.
He
yeah,
must be doing
But
well.
it ebbs and flows, honestly.
Yeah.
It really does. Yesterday was a pretty tough day for him. He said
Yeah.
he's feeling a little bit better today, but
Chris he has COVID, so he,
You're kidding me.
yeah, no, so he's,
it's a breakthrough case. He's boosted the whole 9 yards.
his daughter got it and then he got it.
This is his second time with it, isn't it?
No, he had a different, something else. He's had quite a run. But no, he was really congested for a while, and then he started feeling better. Then he started feeling worse again. So he's definitely in it. I dropped the pizza and a bottle of bourbon off at his front door the other day. Say good luck with it, whatever. But yeah,
Rang the doorbell and ran back to your car.
right. Yeah, basically.
I don't think he said he wasn't boosted. Was he boosted?
I don't
He's
know.
either booster or
He was like in the-
scheduled for
Yeah,
it.
He was scheduled to
Yeah,
be boosted. I talked to him a couple days ago.
Yeah.
that might be it.
Also, Eric Pethel is in the hospital and
What's going on there?
just some serious complications from his cancer. So he's
That's good to know. I tried calling him.
Yeah. Yeah, he's in for the next day or two, I think. So he's hanging in there. His spirits are decent, but he's dealing with a lot, so.
He looked great at the holiday party.
Yeah.
I thought he looked really good at the
He
holiday
just,
party.
yeah, he's got quite a fight in front of him, so. All right, guys, thank you. We'll see you.
congrats on the ready grant.
Yeah, well, it was,
And that's like exactly what you were hoping for.
I'm glad you brought that up. Yeah, so we were awarded 20 million, not 50 million. And, I spoke to Mayor Hogsett and Mayor Jensen before, and I think what we're gonna do is just, everyone's projects that were in there, just, you're all getting reduced the equivalent amount. So so the city of Fishers will receive approximately $3 million.
Great.
So it's, yeah, I wish we would've gotten 50, but, we'll take 20. And that, if you guys remember, that's for 96 Nelsonville, the park and the, Michigan left redo potentially. So, all right, guys, we'll see you.
All right, see you. Thanks.
Anything else? On
No,
review
I think-
policies, financial outlook? any
Yeah,
questions?
so the financial outlook was our discussion there, and so I think as long as you guys looked at the policies and didn't have any major questions, we sent them out last month, so I think we're good.
A motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Second.
Second.
We are adjourned.
Thank you all.
Do you have a-
You all set?
Thank you.
I'll send you guys the other